We'll just ignore the car alarm in the distance and the rain and the dark lighting. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. It is so wonderful to have you here with me today because I'm going to be sharing some tips and my own personal journey on how to overcome depression. So let's get started. I've just been watching The Crown and I feel as though I would like to talk like this today. One feels very called to be sharing one's story in such a way that one feels, how do you say, all of you? I don't know, whatever, anyway. So welcome, I'm really glad. So today we're going to be talking about how to overcome depression, and I'm probably going to do this in 2 parts, maybe 3 depending on how much I talk. And the first part is going to be what depression is and my personal story, and then part 2 will be tips to overcome and to work through and to heal you on your journey as you move through and heal depression. This video comes with a trigger warning. If you do currently have or are experiencing depression in any of its forms, then I just invite you to maybe pause this and come to part 2. If you're somebody who has been through depression and has overcome it, or somebody in your family has, then again I just would like to say that this does have a trigger warning. I am going to be sharing my personal story and some of the personal experiences I had with depression, which may trigger you or a memory of someone in your family, and I just would like to forewarn you that that is potentially the case. And just to say, make sure that you come to this video when you feel completely in a stable, grounded, centered space and ready to receive what I have to share. I think it's wise to start by looking at what is depression, because I didn't really understand it before I had it. I didn't really understand what mental health meant or how it could be experienced. I also think there's a lot of stigma and limiting beliefs in society around depression and other mental health issues, and I feel as though that stigma needs to be reduced. It has been reduced so much since I had depression 8 years ago, and that's really amazing to see and witness that. And I feel as though if I were depressed right now, I would be able to get a lot more support, and I wouldn't have the level of shame and guilt that I did originally feel around it. I was very embarrassed that I had depression, and I felt like that meant that I was weak and something was wrong with me. Even making this video, it's taken me a while to come to a space where I feel I know what I can share and I know what I want to talk about that will actually serve you and help you, whether you in particular are experiencing it or whether somebody you know is. And I also think it's really important to understand what it is, because I just had this completely narrow-minded view of what it was, and so when I experienced it I was very much in denial of it because I did not think that I had it. I didn't know that something was up with me. I just thought maybe I was just, really tired, to be honest with you. I'm sure there are many fantastic definitions of depression all across the internet, but I would just like to share with you my personal understanding, and I also want to share a soul plan perspective of depression as well. So on Google, depression is defined as feelings of severe despondency and dejection. And I think that's actually a really good way to explain it. Severe despondency, when you just feel completely despondent about things and you just think, what's the point of anything? To the point where you don't even bother to get out of bed or to brush your hair or to have a shower, because you just think, what's the point? What's the point of anything? So I think that's a really important thing, and I would like to start by saying that I think the word depression is thrown around a little bit too lightly, and depression is definitely something that is experienced over a long period of time, and it's something that you can't just snap out of. It's something that you just have and experience, maybe as a result of something that's happened to you, or maybe through other things. We will explore a little bit around that. There isn't just a one reason that you would have depression, and there isn't just one type or experience of depression. It kind of varies for every single person. So what I experienced as depression might not ring true for other people, whether that's you personally or somebody you know. That's because we're all different, we're all individuals, we all have different experiences, but there usually is a common thread of that feeling like, what is the point? And I've seen quite a few people say things such as, oh, I feel really depressed today. You can't just feel depressed for a day or a week. It's going to be prolonged. We're talking years. Therefore, please do be mindful when you're throwing that word around, kind of like the word love. These two words, they get thrown around quite a lot, and it's kind of losing its meaning, it's losing its truth. And the truth is that depression is a long-term experience, and it's actually a really heavy, intense challenge. So I just really invite you to be mindful. If you're just having a bad day, or if you're feeling a bit low, then that's quite different to experiencing depression. So I just invite you to maybe look at the language that you're using, and to just be a little bit more respectful and different with your expression of how you're actually feeling. There are many different types of depression, and I don't know all of them. I'll just share what I do know. Of course, you can do your own research, and if you do listen to anything that I share in the video today or in part 2 and you think that sounds like me, or I've experienced that, or I'm experiencing it right now, I do urge you to speak to a medical professional such as a doctor, and also to seek out some kind of counselling or holistic therapy. I will be sharing in part 2 all of the tips and the things I found useful, but if you are listening to this and thinking that sounds like me, please do listen to that, please do respond to that with love, and do something proactive to help heal yourself and move out of that space, because I do truly believe that depression does not have to be a lifelong thing, and that you can manage it. It is something you can overcome, and of course that depends on the type of depression that you have, and also the type of access you have to healing yourself, and also what your soul plan is, and many different things, your ancestral line, the karma that you're experiencing, so many different aspects. But really, I do believe that if you're 100% determined to overcome something, you can really try to at least manage it, if not overcome it. And if you are someone who's been very proactive in trying to overcome depression and haven't found anything that's completely worked, then I just want to encourage you to keep going, and to say to you, it is possible to really manage, if not overcome, something like this, if you can find the right thing for you. And that might not be what I share in the next video, it might be something totally different, but I would recommend that you just try some of these things. I am of course not trained in mental health. I do not specialize in mental health, and I'm not a medical professional, so please do go and seek a medical professional if you are somebody who is looking to really work through and overcome depression if you're experiencing it. But I really believe that anything is possible and anything can be healed, and that's why I wanted to make this video, to help reduce stigma, and also to share tips and tools that I found useful, that even if just one of them is something you enjoy or you find helps you, then that will be really wonderful. So there are different types of depression, and they can range from low mood to sad to dark night of the soul to anxiety. And anxiety can be incredibly intense at times, so that can be a thing of its own, and it can also be part of depression. There's postnatal depression, prenatal depression. There are so many different types. I'm just sharing even just a handful with you, but everybody will experience them individually. So low mood to one person might just be feeling a little bit lethargic and a bit despondent, but to somebody else it might be feeling really down, really despondent, as if there's no point to life or any kind of movement in life. So it's also really important to respect and honour that everybody's on their own journey, and not to judge or criticise somebody if you look at them and you think, but what have you got to be depressed about? Because quite often it's very much about internalised feelings and judgments and conflict, and that can be due to something you've experienced, a trigger perhaps, such as a family member dying or losing your job, or it can be from being abused as a child, or being bullied, or being picked on, or just never feeling good enough. It can be so many different things that trigger or create or bring about depression. So even if you look at someone and their life looks perfect, then they are experiencing their own journey. Just please respect and honour that people will be going through that. So if we just look at a soul plan perspective of the word depression, and as I've said to you before, I love coming to soul plan to look at the core of something, to look at the energetic side of something so I can understand it, because that's how my brain works. I understand things better if I can get like right into the core of them and really see what the root is about, and then release and heal and move from it, just in all aspects. I look at soul plan for everything. I find it so useful. So if we just look at the chart here, we have the foundations of 8-8. So this is actually an energy that is really emotionally intelligent. However, because it's a foundation, that can almost mean that you're on a journey to becoming emotionally intelligent. It can mean that you are perhaps overwhelmed by emotions. You feel bogged down by them. Maybe you're quite sensitive, and there's nothing wrong with being a sensitive person at all. And maybe you take things on board or you absorb things that aren't just your own thing, because 8s can be quite empathic. They're very much in tune to earth and therefore the aura of earth, if you like. I definitely find with 8s, they don't like watching the news because they find it feels too heavy and overwhelming and stressful. And also they're connected to emotions and society. So they're basically like great big sponges walking around, connecting to society, to earth, and obviously what's going on in the world is going to affect these people. Even if they're not consciously tuned into it, they are energetically tuned into it, and they will be picking up on that. So firstly, it's really important if you are somebody with an 8 in your chart, just to be mindful that actually you are very strongly connected to others and to earth, and therefore to do a lot of boundary setting and aura protection. Really healthy, really important, because you need to be able to understand where kind of you end and where something else starts, and also to be able to own your feelings. Quite often, empaths in particular will find that they feel everything of everybody else's, and they then absorb it and think it's their own, and they identify with that. And so just as an aside, if you have an 8, just be mindful and be aware of that element. So back to what that means. So the 8 is really coming in as a foundation of saying you're going on a journey to understand emotions. You might initially feel overwhelmed with them, but eventually you'll be able to manage them and release the ones that aren't serving you. If you've got an accumulation of emotions that are negative for you, you'll be able to heal and release them. It's also an energy that's meant to be really grounded, and I feel like because it's a foundation, it's almost asking you to become grounded. So it could be that you are perhaps not very grounded, and therefore you're unable to process your emotions because you're not completely in your body. If I like to think of it or visualize it as if like this is my physical body, but let's say I was ungrounded, then my spirit, like my feet could start here and go up in terms of how I am. So actually it's really important to be physically present and to be completely grounded in order to deal with your emotions, in order to deal with how you're feeling, and then to clear and heal and move beyond. Sometimes emotions are fleeting. We experience laughter at a joke state. That's just a fleeting thing. But sometimes that can last longer, and vice versa, the more heavy emotions can last longer. So I think actually it's important to recognize that if you're fully in your body, then you can ground and you can move through emotions more, instead of identifying as this is my truth, because it's not. It's just something you're experiencing to understand how to react, right? Because it's all about survival and that root chakra really, which is, do I feel safe? Is it fight or flight? So basically we feel emotions to think, what's my response to what's happening? I feel joy. Okay, I can respond in a happy way. Whoa, I feel fear. Am I going to fight? Am I going to flight? I feel upset. Does that mean I'm going to run away? Does that mean I'm going to stay here? Right? It's just all connected. It's definitely connected to that root chakra. So being really mindful of that as well, of not over-identifying with emotions. They are just there to show you your response to things so that you can act and react accordingly. Then we have the abilities of the 22. This is really interesting actually, and it links a little bit to what I was saying earlier about that internal conflict. So the 20 is the energy of peace to war, and the 2 is the energy of wisdom to folly. So both of those polarities are definitely going to be showing up with some kind of internal conflict. And I mean, it can of course be external conflict that is leading you to be in that space, but because this is an ability, it's asking you to find peace, to find wisdom through what you're experiencing, to process your emotions and find peace and let go of the ones that aren't serving you or that you don't need anymore, and to find wisdom in what you experienced. How can you learn from it and go from there? But of course, that's a really long path sometimes to travel. It's a very intense path to travel. And especially if you have continuous experiences of things that are emotionally heavy, it just is draining, right? So the 20 it's all about movement and flow, but maybe you're in a space of being stagnant. Maybe your energy is really blocked, really stagnant, really heavy in this space of depression. And quite often when that happens, we feel quite blocked in different areas of our life, and we feel as though we can't express ourselves or we can't be ourselves. Something will show up and we just feel blocked in our lives. We feel like there's no flow, there's no movement. Whereas the 2 is the energy of the empath, the energy of the this wise, resilient person. The reason that the 2 is wise is because it's learned from its mistakes. It has that polarity of the wisdom to folly. So it's made the mistakes, or it's experienced the challenges and thought, okay, yeah, those are things have happened, but all right, I'm going to come at it from a different angle, or what can I learn from that before I come at it from a different angle? There's quite a lot of objectivity and bird's eye perspective, if you like, with the 2. Therefore, if you don't have that perspective, then that could be fueling you feeling ungrounded, feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Whereas if you can take yourself out of the situation and look at it from a different perspective, or from above, then you're able to see things differently and respond differently, react differently, and therefore perhaps release something that from that first perspective wasn't really serving you, for example. So the 2 is actually a really resilient energy, and that's really good, especially if the 8 feels overwhelmed, because the 2 is saying, we've got this, we're strong, we can cope with this, we can do this. What's also really interesting is that the 20 is connected to the left nostril, and quite often when you experience depression, breathing isn't necessarily the easiest thing. That can be when anxiety and panic attacks come in, but it's almost like you just can't breathe. You're almost shocked of the state that you feel that you are in, and of life and what's going on around you. It's kind of like you're winded. That would be a good way to describe it. Like you're winded and you can't breathe. And I can remember when I had depression, I was really shallow with my breathing. I was like all the time, almost like I had adrenaline just continuously pumping in case I did need to do the flight aspect and run away, you know, like you're just so on edge all the time, like really tense, and just like it burns you out really quickly. You're so tired because you just got so much adrenaline pumping through you, because you're like oh god, you know, like it's really intense. Like honestly, it's horrible. That's just really interesting that that breath element comes in as well. And again, it's saying if you can find the breath, if you can move with the breath, then you can start to flow. You know, if you can breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, then you're flowing with the breath of life, with the cycles of life. So that's what's going on here. And then interestingly, the success is the 11-2. What's really cool about this is the 11-2 is the energy of structure, assimilation, and harmony. And the 2 again is the wisdom element, wisdom and support. And the 11 is another polarity. This is the polarity of life to death, or life to loss. And often what can trigger depression is loss. Now this can be both tangible loss and it can be intangible loss. So it could be a member of your family dies, whether you're close to them or not doesn't actually always matter. But when we experience something that we felt was secure in our life suddenly dropping away, it shakes our foundation. We think, but oh, who am I without this? Or who am I with this? Or what happens now? And it can be a huge transition. Death and loss are always huge teachers for us. And again, it's linked to the 2. So there's a lot of resilience, a lot of learning, a lot of understanding that you never truly lose anything that's infinite. And of course, your soul and the souls of the people who you love, they are infinite. So even if they're not physically around, they are around in spirit, and you will reunite with them one way or another. But the 11 is also about structure. So what's really interesting is I'm saying that your foundation is being shaken, and it's kind of like there's a new structure that needs to come in. So maybe the way you've been doing things just isn't serving you, it isn't working for you. Maybe it's limiting you in some way, shape or form. And in a way, depression is saying, how can we change our perspective, be more grounded, become emotionally wise and resilient, so that we can create a new way of being, a new perspective, a new structure for our life that will create harmony, because there is that harmony element to the 11. The 11 does come with a who am I journey, and sometimes that can bring on ups and downs of moods. That doesn't necessarily mean definitely depression, but it could just be feeling a bit stressed or a bit low one day because you don't really understand where your life is headed or what your purpose is, and then the next day you might feel completely sure and completely purposeful. So there's a little bit of an up and down with that, because there's always a journey with every energy. But this is definitely saying finding out who you are, and you will become wiser in the process. So basically becoming grounded, not over identifying with your emotions or anybody else's, becoming resilient, flowing with life, and going on a journey of who you are and creating a new harmonious structure for yourself is what depression is about. But of course, that's easier said than done. And also, just to say, if you do have the 8, the 11 or the 20 in your charts, that does not mean you're more prone to depression at all. It will totally depend on a number of different things, and also what life throws at you, and as well as how you handle it. So I just wanted to share that to show that there is an energetic side to depression and what's going on and what it really means. So my story with depression starts back in, I think about 2010, I think about 2009, 2010, and it really started when I was at university and I was very badly bullied, and I would lock myself away in my room and just eat to stuff down my emotions because I was so much in pain and discomfort emotionally with what was going on in my life. But I didn't realize or know anything about that, and I just thought I was tired or I was a bit unhappy. And it was only when I moved back home in 2012 that I was really lethargic, completely despondent, like I didn't want to get out of bed, I didn't want to get dressed, I didn't want to have a wash. I would not wash my hair for like 6 days at a time because I just would think, what's the point? And I would have terrible nightmares, like really awful nightmares that I was being chased and being murdered. And it was just horrible. Like I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and I'd be just covered in sweat, like, oh, it was horrible. It was really scary and horrible. But this continued for a year. I was completely in denial that anything was wrong. I thought I was just a bit tired and I'd just been through a bit of a difficult time, and I was thinking it will go, it'll be fine. But it carried on, and it was only in, I think about January 2013 that I realized something was really up, and I went to see a medical professional. I went to see the doctor, and I had a really lovely doctor, by the way. It really helps if you have somebody you like and you trust. This particular doctor, really lovely person, just really warm and loving and empathetic. And because of those qualities, I felt safe and I felt I could share what I was feeling. So if you are going to see a doctor or anybody who's a medical professional, I do invite you to find somebody you feel a connection with, who you trust and who you feel comfortable to talk to. If it's somebody who's a bit impatient or is like, whatever, hurry up, it's just not going to be conducive to making you feel safe to open up. And I remember I told the doctor what I was experiencing, and I was crying as I was telling her, and I rarely cry in front of people. And I was crying, and she said, well, these are all symptoms that we see with depression. And I remember thinking, what? I don't have depression. What's she talking about? I don't have depression. I thought to myself, maybe I've had like a mini breakdown or something, but I don't think I've got depression. And I remember that she said to me, you know, would you like to have some antidepressants? Because I told her about the nightmares and not sleeping and just not being able to do anything. Like I'd literally wake up, pull some clothes on, and then I'd just sit on the sofa and just stare into space and just think. And I said, oh no, I don't want to take drugs. Like I don't want to do that, no. And she said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, no, I definitely don't want to do that. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to sign you up for a program that we make everybody go on. And it's basically with a counselling company we're linked to, and you go for a night class once a week for, I think, 6 weeks. And they're going to explain to you what depression and anxiety are. And then after that, you get 6 free counselling sessions. And I remember being like, oh, right, okay. And she gave me a note to sign me off sick with depression. And at the time I was actually unemployed, so I had to take it to the job centre, and they had to send me this huge form where I had to fill in how I was feeling, which was really uncomfortable to share like my deepest, darkest feelings on paper. It was really hard actually to do that. I was glad in a way that it was on paper and not in person, but it was really hard to have to explain how I was feeling to complete strangers, and I never really heard anything from them. They were just like, okay, you're off sick. I did that, and about maybe a week or two later, probably about 2 weeks later, I remember thinking, I think I need the antidepressants. I'm really not sleeping, I really feel overwhelmed, and I think I need more help than I thought I did. And so I went back to the doctor, and she prescribed me just a small dose initially, and then after a month they built it up double, and then again up again. I was really ashamed, to be completely honest with you, because I'd always seen myself as somebody who was really strong, really dealt with things well. I always talked about my emotions and how I was feeling, so I was like, I'm perfectly good at explaining myself and dealing with things. And I always thought I was really tolerant as a person, you know, I tolerated other people and how they were, and I accepted them for what they did and who they were. But actually what I was doing was just allowing them to treat me really badly and to bully me and pick on me, because I just didn't care about myself at all. I thought I was completely worthless, and just, yeah, I was really not in a good place about how I felt about myself. So when I took the antidepressants, I was kind of surprised at how quickly I felt nothing would be the best way to describe it. it is a bit weird because it's not that you can't experience joy or whatever, like obviously you can, but you kind of just feel very flat and very numb. And it wasn't a bad thing because I had just felt so overwhelmed and stressed, and I was so tired from not sleeping that in a way I was really grateful for the respite, and I slept slightly better. I still had a couple of nightmares and things, but it wasn't as bad. I wouldn't really say I was able to do much. I was a nightmare to be around. I was really quiet and didn't talk much, but when I did, I very quickly became very angry, almost aggressive with how I was expressing myself. But then I would feel really guilty that I was being horrible, and so I would just cry immensely and run away and hide. And so I completely shut myself off from the world. Once I'd seen the doctor the first time, I texted my 2 best friends and I said to them, oh, the doctor has said I'm not very well, I'm just going to take some time out, so you might not hear from me very much. If I don't reply to any messages or calls or anything, don't take it personally, I'm just having time out. I didn't actually ever tell my best friend, my other best friend. Even to this day, he doesn't know. And I really wish I had, because it just completely created a block between us. So that's definitely something I regret, is I wish I had felt more comfortable to share it. I was just so embarrassed, so humiliated that I had thought I was a strong person, and suddenly it was turning out that I must be weak if I was experiencing this. But actually that's really not the case. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is acknowledge and accept that you do have depression on whatever type or level, and do something and take the steps to try and work through it. Now for me, I feel as though my depression started in around 2009, and I think that from 2013 it became a dark night of the soul. So it slightly was different, and not everybody's is like that. Yours may just continue the way mine started, or you may just have a dark night of the soul. But I'd had it for a few years, and then I feel like once I started going for healing, it became this huge spiritual awakening for me. And I'm not really going to get into that in this video because there are other videos where I share that. I really want to just focus on what my experience of depression was. Yeah, so I think in a way that probably helped me to overcome it, because it was almost as if the universe was like, okay, she's waking up, she's ready to do the next part of her journey. Let's just intensify this so that she can kind of release it, and then she can move on to the next thing. Kind of like, and that's kind of gross analogy, but sort of like a spot, you know, when it like comes up and it becomes one that you can squeeze. Ugh, that's gross, I know, but when you can squeeze it and it releases and then it heals over and it's fine and it goes back to being normal skin, as opposed to like a blackhead that's just permanently there. That was a really unattractive analogy there, sorry. So firstly, if you do have, or if you have experienced depression, or if you know somebody who does, it is nothing to be ashamed of. Do not feel guilty, do not feel ashamed, do not feel humiliated or embarrassed as I did. That's one thing I really regret, is that through that really critical perfectionist lens I was looking at myself, I couldn't even allow myself to experience feeling unwell or feeling stressed or feeling low, or just excuse the dog barking. Yeah, I wouldn't really allow myself to feel that, because I had just this, you have to be perfect, you have to be a certain way, if you don't, you're a failure. And obviously that's not the case. I just really invite you to know that you're not a failure. You have nothing to be ashamed of or to feel guilty about. Actually, I think depression is something that many people experience, the majority of people experience on some level, and I really think it's important to honour that that is part of your journey, and to know that it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. So once I'd seen the doctor, she had signed me up for a, I guess kind of like a preliminary assessment with a counsellor, and I can't remember his name, but we'll call him John. And I went and met him. He was very kind, very caring. So I went along and I had the session, and we talked about an eating disorder that I'd had. We talked about my anxiety and my panic attacks, and we talked about how I was feeling. And he signed me up for the next, I think it was the next week, that I don't really know what you'd call it. It was kind of like a night class for understanding depression. And I was so nervous about going. Like, the last thing I wanted to do when I was depressed was be around people. I honestly just wanted to be alone and hide away from the world. And here was this person saying, come and join a group of us, we're going to talk about depression. I was like, that's the last thing I want to do. But I went because I really wanted to overcome and work through it. I remember every week they would just like have these rows of chairs with this, it was a really tiny room, there was like 25 of us in there, and had the projector screen at the front, and they'd do a little presentation of like what panic attacks were, what anxiety was, what depression was, and all the different things. But every week they give us the sheet to fill in of like, how are you feeling today? Have you brushed your teeth? Have you washed your hair? Have you got dressed? Have you had any suicidal thoughts? All those kinds of things. We'd fill the sheet in and hand it back to them, and then they'd go through the presentation. And honestly, I sat there and I remember thinking, oh, okay, yeah, I do have depression. I can see that. Yep. Tick, I have that. Tick, I have that. And they gave us a little booklet actually where we had to go through it and like tick off stuff. And I just literally ticked every page. It was the most uncomfortable thing ever. Like, I can't lie to you, every single week I just wanted to run out of that room or not go. But I was like, I have to do this. I owe it to myself to do this. You know, I always have had this belief that this can't just be it. There's more to life than whatever is being presented. So when I was experiencing depression, I just kept thinking to myself, I cannot have just come to earth to be depressed. That cannot just be my purpose or my story. Like, surely there's more to it. And that was really the driving force that led to me seeking healing. And I kind of went from 0 to 100. You do not need to do that, by the way. That's just what worked for me. That was why I stayed in those classes. And also because I knew if I completed the 6 classes or whatever, that I would then get 6 counseling sessions. And that was what I really wanted. I really wanted to be able to go into that and experience and receive the counseling that I really felt I needed. And I remember at the very end of the 6 weeks, they gave us, oh, actually we had to pay £5, a muscle relaxation meditation. And that was kind of the first meditation that I did, aside from I had done one shamanic drumming meditation a very long time ago, which now I'm like, that wasn't really culturally appropriate, but again, that's a different story. So I bought the meditation, the progressive muscle relaxation meditation, that's what it was. And I remember it took me a while to play it, but when I did, it was basically just leading you through all the different areas of the body, and then you tense it for like 5 seconds and then let it go to relax it. Really useful. So I did that, and then afterwards I went back to the doctor and she signed me up for the 6 free counselling sessions, which you could take as close together or as far apart as you wanted. But in the meantime, my mum had been to a mind, body and spirit event, and she'd bumped into a healer who we both knew from a couple of years before, who'd given us both tarot readings separately. He happened to say, oh, how's Marilise? And my mum said, actually, she's not great at the moment. She's seeing the doctor and getting some help. And he said, get her to come and see me. It's really important when you have counselling to release what's being brought up, because often things that are buried come up, and it's really good to let them go. My mum mentioned it to me and I was like, okay, I will give it a go. Had no idea what to expect. I'd never had any kind of spiritual healing or anything like that before, so I had no idea what to expect. I went for my first counselling session and I happened to have a session booked the next day with the healer. I can hear my dog coming to see me. Hello, are you gonna come and see me? Up here, please. Good boy. Yes, that's nice. You gonna sit there? That's just the dog panting, not me. So I went to see the counsellor, started talking, and it was a really weird experience, by the way. If you've never had counselling, there's always this preconceived idea that you'll go and they'll just give you all the answers and you'll be fixed. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bong. But that's not actually the case. You go and see a counsellor and it's more about you having space that's safe, where you're completely held and supported to completely share anything you want, totally non-judgmental, non-critical, and you can just share it and the other person will hear you out. And in that space of being able to share, you yourself hear things and think, wait a minute, I did that because of that, or that person did that to me because of this. And it allows you to have your own aha moments. And that's what's really cool about counselling. If you go and talk to a friend, their immediate reaction is to want to give you advice, to help you, because they love you, they care about you, they want to say to you, well, have you thought of doing this? Why don't you try that? As wonderful as that is, when you're depressed, you really need the complete opposite. You need to be with somebody who will hold that space and just let you say anything you want without jumping in and interrupting you and stopping your train of thought, and just totally allow you to say things. Because as you start saying things, more things will come out, and then you realize and you think, oh, that's why I believe that about myself, or that's why I act like that, or that's why I do that. So it's really powerful, and that's the coolest thing about counselling. And then I went to go and see the healer, I think the next day, and you know, I lay on his couch and he placed crystals on me, and he was kind of whispering some chants or whatever whilst there was some music playing. But to be honest, I just loved that I was lying there. I felt safe. There was silence except for the music. I really just felt a sense of peace that I'd never experienced before. And it was really cool. And that's when I had all my downloads and my awakening and everything. But also it was just the most healing space. Even just the vibration, the energy of this place I was in just felt really good, you know, to be with the crystals and everything. Lovely crystals. that's kind of what continued to happen, is I would go for counselling, and then either the same day or the next day I would go for healing. And the counselling sessions obviously finished, but I continued to pay for healing sessions. I would go once a week initially for about 6 months, and then I went once every 2 weeks to once every 4 weeks, depending on how I was feeling, for about another 6 to 8 months. I went for a really long time because I was really dedicated to overcoming and releasing it. So this all started like February, March 2013 that I was receiving healing and counselling, and I don't think it ended until June 2014. I went for a really long time. So again, even though I'd had it for a long period of time, I also put a long period of time into actually going through the process of healing it. And it was really worth it. It really helped. And obviously nowadays, yes, I still get anxiety. Yes, I occasionally have panic attacks. Yes, I do find I feel low at times, but it's not the same. I know how to manage it now if I do experience it. I have tips and tools that I'll be sharing with you in the next video that really help me, that I can tap into and use whenever I feel that happening. So I hope that you found this really interesting and really helpful, and I will see you in part 2.